and welcome back! Or welcome me back? Sorry, I've been so MIA, guys. I've been busy with a lot of things. I feel like I always say that, but I finally made the time to make this tutorial. Today, we're going to be talking about how to export your model from live2d and set up in VTube Studio. Other programs are available, but I use VTube Studio, so we're going to go over that one. And although it's not completely about rigging today, I did want to make this video before I made my other rigging tutorials coming soon, just for reference. And I know people have been asking about this tutorial for some reason from me. I don't know why you guys want me to make tutorials about everything. There's other people, you know. And yes, I do have a new model. If you haven't noticed it yet, I have been streaming with it on YouTube right here on this channel. But yeah, let's just go straight into our file on live2d and get started. Okay, I totally recorded everything and then 5.0 came out, so I have to redo this. If you don't have 5.0 already, you should download it. Doesn't matter if you have free or pro. Obviously, it'll be a lot nicer if you're pro, but you can get 5.0 for either one. And before we start, make sure you have VTube Studio downloaded from Steam. But without further ado, let me open up my file. Alright, so before we can start exporting our model to be used in VTube Studio, we need to first make the texture atlas. If you haven't made your texture atlas yet, it's just this button over here. It's got like pictures and stuff, and it'll say Edit Texture Atlas. Just click on that. Okay, now since I've already exported my model before, I will have a texture atlas already. Here's the texture atlas and everything. I think you might be put into a similar screen, but with no textures in your atlas at the moment. If you do, you can just hit texture up here and then initialize texture atlas. Hit yes. And this will reset your texture atlas. And this is how we're gonna have live2d auto place our textures into the atlas because I'm lazy. But if you want to do it manually, you can. So here's the texture name. You can name whatever you want. I'm just gonna leave it default. For the width, I'm gonna start with about 4000 by 4000. If you're on the free version, you will be limited by this. But this is basically how large your texture atlas is. If you have a lot of layers and really big, crispy art, you're gonna want a bigger texture atlas. But if you have a really simple model with less layers and the resolution's not super big, you can make it lower. We can always change it later once we test it out though. And then for the default layout, I'm gonna use the default, which is displayed model images. If you click the arrow down here, you'll see 3 options. There's do not place, which means when it makes your texture atlas, it won't place any of your textures on the atlas. All model images is every art layer. So when it says model images, it's going to be talking about your art layers. And when it says all, it's going to put everyone that's hidden and unhidden. You know a layer is hidden if the eyeball over here is closed. And then displayed model images are all the images that aren't hidden. And I'm going to use displayed model images because if my layers are hidden, I don't really want them in the texture atlas taking up space because you're not going to see them anyway. And then if you click set automatic layout here, it's going to show you some options like this. I just leave it on defaults. I don't usually play around with that. And I'm going to press OK. Now it's going to generate the texture atlas and also auto place all of my displayed model images, aka my art layers. It might take a while depending on how many layers you have. Okay, now that it's done, you can see all of my layers in here. And then over here, all of these layers here, these are hidden layers because as I said, I picked to only put in my displayed model images. So these are only hidden ones that they didn't display. Now, if you click on one of your layers here, like if I click my top, you can see the scale. Now the scale is just how big your art is basically from the default. And since my scale is about 80%, that means it's only 80% of the original art. So the resolution of that art is a little lower. And since I'm on the pro, I can afford to make a bigger texture atlas. So I'm going to go back into texture and initialize my texture atlas again to reset it. And I'm going to make it 4000 by 8000 just to give it a little more room since I'm pretty close to 100. I just need that little push. So this will make it 4000 by 8000. And now you can see we have a little extra room, which is good. That means everything is scaled at 100%. If I select everything here, it's at 100%. Now I'm going to be honest, I don't know too much about texture atlases. I'm just trying to show you guys the nitty gritty to actually get your model exported. There's a lot of other things over here and all these buttons here. Most of them are self-explanatory, but I don't know how to tell you how to use them to make anything better. I'll just say make sure none of your art is touching, especially if you have a piece of art where you only meshed a piece of it to make the other part of it invisible. You're going to want to keep an eye out for that. So if I press OK here, it's going to make my texture atlas. Now you can see this corner, you can show the texture atlas. I usually don't touch that though. And then just make sure your model is looking okay. No weird art overlapping. For example, if I moved my hair into all of my face pieces here and press OK, you're gonna see my hair overlapping all of these random pieces. And you don't want that, so make sure you don't have any art overlapping. Unless you do want the art overlapping, then that's up to you, I guess. But now that we have our textstrat list all set up and good to go and everything looks normal at the moment, you're gonna wanna go to File, Export for Runtime, and you're gonna export it as an MOC3 file. This is the file that VTube Studio is gonna use. And then here are the export settings that open up once you hit that. Be mindful of your SDK version. Obviously, now that we're on 5.0, we can use 5.0. Also, you want to usually make sure that whatever program you're using does accept the current SDK. Right now, VTube Studio is updated to accept 5.0 SDK, so it's fine if you put it in there. Now, I'm going to change it to 5.0 on my export version, but when you're working on your model, you can always change your SDK over in this corner. As a little heads up, and then all of this might look overwhelming, but honestly the defaults are usually fine. So I'm just gonna hit OK, and now it's gonna open up your file explorer. Now there's a couple ways to do this. I used to save my files in a document folder, and then I would copy that folder into the folder where I'm supposed to have my VTube Studio models to actually use them. You can do that, just remember to make a new folder called like your name model, and then put it into that empty folder because it'll spit out extra files, and you wanna keep them contained because you will need to. But now I will just go straight into my VTube Studio live2d models folder. Usually I would just go into my recent folders here and click on one of my recent folders I just put into VTube Studio live2d models and stick it in there. But if you need help finding it, you go to your PC, go to your C drive. I'm gonna go to Program Files 86. I'm gonna find Steam, go to Steam Apps, go to Common, find VTube Studio Data, Streaming Assets, and then finally live2d models. Now I'm gonna have a ton of models in here. You're probably gonna have the default models that VTube Studio comes with if you just downloaded VTube Studio. But I'm gonna make a new folder. I'm gonna call this Cubicle model version 1, enter, and then I'm gonna go into that folder and save my cubicle model.moc3, save that in. It might take a while, it might not, but once it's done, it's gonna pop up another file explorer thing and then show you where your model files are. Just check over, make sure everything's looking good and it's in the right folder, and then we're good to go straight into VTube Studio. Now you can open it normally up through Steam, but if you're still in the file explorer here, I like to go over up here to just VTube Studio, and VTube Studio will have a batch file called start without Steam. Usually I use that because it opens it up without Steam. So one, you're not burning through tons of hours on Steam. Whenever anyone looks at your Steam profile, it says you spent 10,000 hours on VTube Studio. Personally, I don't like that, but if you do, that's fine. I also like to start without it because it doesn't have the Steam overlay. For people who use Steam a lot, you know, it's like Shift Tab and all the Steam stuff comes up. I heard somewhere that it takes less strain off your PC. Don't quote me on that, but I just like using it in general. The one thing about using it without Steam is that you're not connected to the Steam servers. So if you try to use VNet on VTube Studio, you can't. So you will need to use the actual VTube Studio.exe if you want to use VNet to connect to Steam. VNet is a whole different tutorial though. It's basically VTube Studio multiplayer, but you will need to pay for the DLC. But now that we have our model files in the VTube Studio live2d models file, let us open up VTube Studio to set it up. Alright, so here we are in VTube Studio. This is definitely not the fourth time I'm re-recording this part, but today we're just gonna go over how to import your model and set up the parameters and make sure the parameters work for your model. If this is not your first time using VTube Studio, you can probably just skip to how to fix your parameters. But if this is your first time on VTube Studio, you're probably gonna have a watermark in the bottom left corner. It's gonna be the VTube Studio's mascot floating around. To get rid of that, you're gonna have to buy the watermark DLC on Steam, or when you put it into OBS, you can just crop it out. I won't be going over how to put your model into OBS today, but if you guys want a tutorial for that, let me know. So to put in our model, we just imported into VTube Studio, you're gonna wanna double click, and this will open up the menus. You're gonna click on the first one, which is this person icon. That's gonna pop open this little bar that shows you all the models you have in that folder. You're probably gonna have VTube Studio's example models in here. And then if you imported your model right, you're gonna have one with no icon, and it's gonna be the name of your file. If you click on that one, it should pop up. If it doesn't pop up, you might want to double check if you put everything in the folder right, or if it's in a folder at all, and just make sure everything is exported correctly. But once it's open, it's going to ask you if you want to run the auto setup for your model. If you're more experienced and you have other models in VTube Studio you'd like to copy the parameters from, just use the copy setup from another model. But if it's your first time, just hit auto setup. So we're going to hit auto setup, and that's going to create the VTube Studio parameters for your model. Your number may or may not be different from mine. I think it depends on what parameters you have for your model. I'm not 1000% sure, but around this number should be good. Just hit OK. Now you can click and drag your model around and use your scroll wheel to make them bigger and smaller. I'm gonna position her right here. And then now that our model is imported into VTube Studio, we're gonna need to connect our tracking device so we can actually get the model to track to our face. So to do that, we're gonna head over to the settings menu right here, the little gear, the pink one. Click on that, and it's gonna open up all the settings. Now there's a couple of different tracking devices you can use. Obviously your phone if you have an Android or an iPhone X and above, or you can use your webcam if you have one. If you don't have anything that tracks your face, any sort of camera, you can make the model track to your mouse, but we will not be going over that. So personally, I use an iPhone 11. I think at the moment iPhone tracking is still the best face tracking you can use. Don't quote me on that, but I know a lot of people like to get refurbished iPhone X's just for tracking their model. So if you're using your phone on Android or your iPhone, you're gonna want to download VTube Studio on your phone so you can connect your phone's VTube Studio to your PC's VTube Studio. I won't be going over how to do all of that, but just make sure your server is up, your phone and your PC are connected to the same internet, and then just connect it, and then your model should be moving like this. Hopefully, you might need to look up a different tutorial if you're not getting it right. If you're struggling to get this to work, I would recommend looking up a different tutorial. I'm pretty sure VTube Studio has their own official tutorials for connecting your phone to your PC. But once that's connected, you can actually recalibrate your model. Right now, I'm staring straight into my monitor, and obviously my model is not staring with me. So you just go to your phone and hit the recalibrate button. And for this, some people are a little confused with the recalibration. You need to set your face in a neutral state. So you're gonna have to look forward where you want your neutral state to be, and then have a neutral face. So that VTube Studio registers that as your neutral face. So when you're actually making expressions, your model will do the same. So you'll stare forward and recalibrate. And there we go. Now I'm moving correctly, or more correctly, I guess. Also, if you're using VTube Studio with your phone, you will need to buy the pro version on your phone, because if you use the free version, you can only connect to your PC with your phone for I think 5 or 10 minutes. But if you buy the pro version, you can connect for an unlimited time. So just a heads up, if you are using webcam, it's going to be in the second tab of the settings. And it's going to be pretty obvious. You just choose your camera and your tracking quality and your tracking type. After you put these in though, I would go back in the tracking quality and then figure out what works best for you. For example, if I click on this, there's going to be levels 0 to 5 and then RTX on and Google. If you have an RTX GPU, you're gonna be able to use this. If you don't, I'm pretty sure most people have access to the MediaPipe webcam tracker. Personally, for myself, when I was trying these out, I preferred the Google MediaPipe one, but I would play around with whichever one works best for your face. I will say for webcam, make sure your face is illuminated nicely so it can actually read your face. So don't be playing in pitch darkness, please. But of course, if you don't have the Google or the RTX on one, try to do the highest level possible. But yeah, play around with those. Also, if you're using webcam most of the time, I would turn on the auto start cam with VTS. So your camera turns on every time you open up VTS, and you don't always have to go here and hit camera on. If you're using webcam to track, you don't have to buy any fancy DLC to keep continuing to track your face with webcam, but you will have the little watermark in the corner. So just a heads up. But now that you have your tracking device connected and it's hopefully moving your model the way it should sort of move, let's go ahead and fix up our model. So first things first, this may or may not happen to you. You might be moving your head and your model is not moving along with you correctly, or certain parts of your model are not moving at all while others are. If your model is not moving with you at all and you followed my tutorials and have your movements connected to physics, you will need to go back into live2d and make sure that when you're in the physics menu, your model moves along with you when you're actually using the inputs. If your model is working correctly in live2d and it's not working in VTube Studio, there are a couple reasons it could happen. I think a common one is, for some some reason, if you have a hidden art folder in live2d and you export that, one random common occurrence I think that happens to me a lot is sometimes I'll have a random folder that is hidden in live2d, but the contents of that folder are within warps that are rigged, and it'll look perfectly fine in the physics menu, but when I go out and export to VTube Studio, some parts of my model will be stiff and not moving at all while others are. I don't know why, but I would just go back into live2d, make sure all of your art layers and your art folders are unhidden, and make sure anything you're not using is at opacity 0. I'm not sure if I'm just being dumb, but when that happens, I do that and it usually works. If your model barely moves in the physics menu and it's barely moving in VTube Studio, you need to go back and fix your physics settings. Other issues could be that you have weird white outlines around your art, especially when you zoom out. If you go on the third tab here, you can just hit fix white outlines right here and that'll fix those up. Another issue I think a lot of people have are if you have glasses. If you wear glasses and the glare causes your tracking device to mess up your eyes and they look weird and they're not blinking right. On the second tab here, if you scroll down, you can link your eye blinking to always when you wear glasses, just so that it looks a little less awkward. Back when I used to use webcam and I wore glasses a lot, I would do that. My eyes would always be weird, so I'd always have to link my eye blinking. And along with that, on the tracking settings here, you can change the sensitivity of everything. So if you test everything here, like your blink, your eye open, your mouth smile, which is mouth forms, and then your brow sensitivities, you can edit all of those to make sure everything is working the way you want. For example, when I hold a neutral face, my mouth is slightly agape, if you see here. That will happen for people who have a little more lips than no lips. But you'll notice that if you do open mouth sensitivity, it won't really fix that. For example, if I hold my neutral face and I slide this around, it doesn't really do much. That's when we have to go into our actual parameters and fix that up. So going to our third tab over here, this is where all the parameters are. But let me first go through all of these things up here. This is gonna be the title of your model in VTube Studio. So if you wanna change that to something easier, instead of your file name, go ahead. I'm gonna name it Chupuko version 1. And then you can stick an icon PNG into your folder. And then if you click on no icon here, you can select that PNG there. I have not made tutorials for these, but if you do have them, you can add your idle animation and your tracking loss idle animation here. You do have to make sure that those exported files are in your model file in VTube Studio. And going down here, I talked about fixed white outlines already. If you're connected to your phone, you can send your model to your phone. And then customize model, I will not go over, but that's for like fancy, fun VTube Studio stuff. All right, movement config here. It's usually going to be activated by default, but it basically just adds more movement to your model. If you lean back and forth and like just move around your body and everything, it's gonna move your model in ways you didn't really rig. Now, some people like that, but if you don't, like me, you just deactivate that and that will set your model to not move all over the place. Especially if you do collabs with people, it's nice to turn this off so you're not sliding across the screen. But you can always edit the XYZ planes to see how much you wanna move wherever you're moving. And then down here is the physics settings. If you have a lot of things connected to physics, like me, if you followed my physics tutorials for the angles and body angles, you do not want to edit the physics strengths. If you're moving your model and you don't like your hair physics or your clothing physics, you're gonna have to edit that in live2d. But you can also just play around with it and see what works for you. Because if we put this to max, my body angles are gonna be really crazy. But if we put it to minimum, I don't move at all because everything is connected to physics. So I'll set that back to default. Now going down here, these are gonna be all your parameters down here. You might have a lot. I mean, hopefully you have a lot. That means you rigged enough of your model, I think. So let me go over everything on these parameter cards. Obviously, this is the title of the parameter. This is the face left / a right rotation, which is gonna be when we look left and right, which is our angle X. So this is our input here, which is face angle X. If you click on input, you can see all the inputs you can use. I am gonna have more than you probably because I have plugins. But yeah, so face angle X is just when we look left and right. That's gonna input left and right into VTube Studio. And then our output is gonna be what we rigged. So it's gonna be param angle X. And if you click on output, you can see all the outputs. Some of them, if you're a diligent rigger and you name all your params correctly, this will probably be easier to navigate through. Obviously, I didn't. So we have param like 73, param 16, all over the place. But you'll notice that some of them are red. This means that they're already an output for a different parameter in VTube Studio, so you can't use that as another output. And then the blue one just means it's the one that's selected, and the gray means it's one that you could select because it's not being used. So hypothetically, if we had our input to face angle X and our output to blink, when we look left and right, we would blink. Hopefully that makes sense. I think that should make sense. Input, that's what you're doing with your face. Output is what you rigged for that movement of your face. Now, usually I just ignore these limit ranges. If you know what you're doing, you can edit these, but under that is going to be the smoothing line. For example, if you think yourself looking left and right is a little too sharp, a little too jagged, you could smooth this out more. Or if it's way too smooth, you can put this lower on the scale. If you did yours along with my tutorial and it's connected to physics, it will probably be pretty smooth, hopefully. So you don't have to do too much to that. And then under the smoothing is auto blinking and auto breathing. So if you turn these on, these will set these to automatically have the output over here. Under these, you'll see the number when you input your left and right turns. That will be these numbers here. And then the output obviously is our parameters here. If you set this to auto blinking, it will automatically make the parameters so that it's like a blinking animation, if that makes sense. Usually if you have some sort of animation that you're too lazy to animate in live2d, you can animate it in VTube Studio with these simple ones. For example, maybe you have a little pet on your shoulder and you rigged it to have like pet blink and you put it into VTube Studio. You can make a new parameter, set the output to that blink, and then turn on auto blinking and it will blink automatically instead of having any sort of input. Same for breathing. If there's something that you want to go from like 0 to 1 slowly and then back to 0 and back to 1 slowly, you would turn on auto breathing. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm sorry if it doesn't. And like I said, input numbers, output numbers. You can edit these numbers to fix how well your model is tracked. I'm really bad at putting this into words, but I would go through each of these parameters and make sure that they are tracking you correctly. Obviously, this is face angle X. If you look left and right, you're going to want to make sure you get the full range of the movement you rigged. Obviously, as I just tested, my angle X's are pretty good. So I would implore you guys to check each one if it's your first time with VTube Studio to make sure that everything is actually getting the full range of your rig. If it's not, I would play around with the output numbers or the input numbers, depending on which one looks off to you, to make sure that you're taking full advantage of your rig. At first, it might be confusing, but if you play around with the numbers a bit, it might make more sense to you if you can't really envision it right now. I'm really bad at explaining it, so maybe someone in the comments can make a better explanation for this. But I'm gonna go ahead and show you how I fixed the mouth and everything. So down here in the filter, you can look up mouth. This will show you everything that has mouth in the name. So first one here is blush when smiling. Input mouth smile, so that's when we smile, and the output is param cheek. Now for some reason, VTube Studio always has this at 0.5 as a minimum, but then our output is always gonna be like above 0.5. So we're like perpetually in the middle. I like to put this to like -1, just so that there's a greater difference in my expressions. For example, instead of half smiling all the time, I can be more neutral if I'm having my neutral face on. And then when I smile, you can actually see the full difference instead of going from a half smile to a full smile. It's just more of an impact. Also depends on what you rigged on param cheek, because maybe you do want constant blush, or you can just set constant blush to a default. Up to you, of course, but I just like to put mine to -1. All right, next is our mouth open. Like I was talking about before, my mouth is slightly agape when my mouth is closed. We kind of don't want that. So to fix that, I'm going to change it -0.2. And now when I have a neutral face, my mouth is closed. Obviously, it looks like my mouth closes a little more now. So you can edit that number closer to 0 just so it's not as sharp like that. However, what I like to do is actually connect my mic to my mouth. So I'm going to go into the input here. I'm going to look up mouth open. And there's going to be 2 options here. Mouth open, which is already selected, and then voice volume plus mouth open. Voice volume is going to be the volume from our mic. So I'm going to select that one. And then obviously I'm going to need to change it for my mouth smile too, which is going to be our mouth forms. I'm going to change our mouth smile into voice frequency plus mouth smile. Now, you don't have to do all of this microphone stuff if you don't like it. I'm just going to show people who are interested in it and maybe you want to try it out and see if it works for you. But just to explain the inputs a bit, voice volume and voice frequency is going to come from our mic. And then plus mouth open plus mouth smile just means when our mouth is open, it will still trigger our mouth open on our model, as you can see here. But it's going to look like there's no difference yet because we have not connected our mic. So to connect your mic to VTube Studio, you're going to go to the settings here. and you're gonna scroll down until you find the microphone settings right here. You're gonna wanna use microphone, so turn that on. And then if you click on microphone, you can connect to your mic. And then you might see that it's already working a bit. A lot of people ask me how I get my mouth movement so fluid and if I use rebridger or not. I don't, I just use the microphone stuff in VTube Studio. Now, it might look a little weird. That's because you need to fix all of these sliders here. So volume gain is gonna be obviously the volume from our mic. If we put this to max, it's gonna make it so that my mouth is constantly at max open all the time. If we put this at minimum, it's gonna be our small mouth most of the time. So I would keep talking and playing around with it until you find one that looks sort of okay. Like not too crazy, but not too not crazy. Maybe like around here, I'll go with 25. Volume cutoff is, I believe, basically a noise gate. So you can play around with that. Make sure that if you're like banging on your keyboard, your mic doesn't pick it up. So if it does, I would increase this until it doesn't pick up any background noise. Of course, if you always have background noise or people talking into your mic, like multiple people, I probably wouldn't use the microphone settings for VTube Studio, but... And then frequency gain down here is gonna be what affects our mouth forms. So if I put this to max, it's gonna go through all my mouth forms like a lot. I put this to minimum, it's gonna be at my default one basically a lot. I would change that until everything looks sort of okay. Yeah, it looks okay. It looks a little better than before, I think. Obviously, I can make some changes, but maybe if I turn this down, it'll be a little nicer. Now our mic is connected. Also, you might notice that there is advanced lip sync down here. If you followed my mouth tutorial, you cannot use these because you'll have to rig these a certain ways on certain parameters. I did not do that, so I cannot use the advanced lip sync. But I will be doing the advanced lip sync for my new model in my new series if you guys want to follow along with that one. I've heard a lot of good things about the new advanced lip sync for VTube Studio, so I'm excited to try it out. But yeah, that is it for the mic portion, and now my mouth is not slightly agape at my neutral look, and yeah. We go back to parameters here. If you close out of your filter here and scroll all the way down, you can add parameters, which is important if you have any custom parameters you made in live2d. I would put those in there, or if you want to play around with something. But after you fix up all your parameters and make everything look okay and decent, you're basically done. If you need to go back into live2d and fix up some physics, you can just re-export the model right on top of the other file you just exported and just save over it. And then feel free to check out everything else VTube Studio has. On the last tab of settings here, these are for toggles and expressions. Tutorial coming soon. If we close out of here, our model here. There's a lot of cool stuff on VTube Studio to use, so I would recommend playing around with everything. And yeah, I mean, that's basically it for the how to export your model into VTube Studio tutorial. So, I mean, thank you guys for watching. Feel free to click off now. But if you're still here, I would like to make some announcements. Number one, yes, I am streaming on YouTube a lot more, but I am slightly streaming on Twitch a little bit. So if you guys would like to come to the streams, please come by. We have a lot of fun sometimes. And sometimes we get work done, sometimes. I also have an outfit contest going on right now. There are a few weeks left to join. The winner gets a live2d chibi model from me. So if you want to come join for a chance to win that, please feel free to join our Discord. Link in description. All of the contest information is on the Discord, along with our new monthly events on Discord. If you guys want to come along and draw. This month for October, we are doing a little Halloween special for the first event. And basically, you just have to draw yourself dressed up as any anime, as any show or video game character. Here's my example doodle of me and Remnant 2. If you also have any questions, you can feel free to join our Discord and ask, and me or someone else would be happy to help you out with any rigging questions or art questions. And overall, we have a jolly old time, you know? And if you didn't hear before, I am making a new model, a new model, just to make a more intermediate rigging tutorial series, because I have my beginner one right now, and I just wanted to make a new updated one with my new style of rigging, which I think might be a little easier, maybe, especially with the 5.0 update. It makes a lot of things a lot nicer. So yeah, please look forward to that, and without further ado, goodbye.